Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Michelle Otstadt, and I'm an assistant professor with the UAGC Early Childhood Education Program. I'm the host of this session, Montessori's Planes of Development, Supporting the Whole Child. By joining us today, you acknowledge that this session is being recorded and will be shared with TLC-related materials. Microphones will be muted for this presentation, but we encourage you to post questions and comments in the chat. Also, we have enabled live transcription. If you'd like to use it, click the Show Captions button at the bottom of your Zoom's window. Now, I'm very excited and pleased to introduce to you Dr. Pat Barton. She's the Early Childhood Coordinator for Arizona Montessori Teacher Education Program. Dr. Barton, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Pat Barton, and I have been an early childhood Montessori teacher for more than 20 years. I also directed and owned a Montessori toddler preschool kindergarten program for many years. Currently, I work at a public Montessori program in Mesa, Arizona. I've also been a Montessori coach at a public program, and I taught middle school and high school math at a Montessori school also. My PhD is in curriculum instruction and the science of learning. And while I am deep in Montessori and I actually taught at a school with my mom started, I am not a Montessori child. But aside from that, I've been in Montessori for many, many years. So as we begin, I was curious. I know that I might not be able to see everyone, but what people's exposure to Montessori might be. I know Dr. Otstadt is Montessori trained and has been in the Montessori classroom, but I was just curious about anyone else's. So if you could note that in the chat, and maybe Dr. Otstadt could pass it on if anyone posts, that would be great.
I can do that for you.
Sure. Just also note, I am an early childhood instructor with AMTEP. As Dr. Ostap mentioned, I teach philosophy and early childhood math. So um, before we begin too, is I wanted you to take a moment to think about your thoughts about child development. So what's your sort of one idea or one concept you might have coming into this? What different theorists or philosophers or pedagogy are you most familiar with, or do you ground yourself in, or concepts of childhood? If you take a moment to think about that. And just hold on to that word. We'll come back to it in at the end. Before we start on planes of development, I know I really feel like it's important to ground ourselves into a little bit more about who Montessori was, and maybe you'll learn a little bit more about some of her life and really her perspective, especially as we look at education theory and philosophers. There aren't that many women standing out, and also just her background. Montessori was a one of the first medical doctors in Italy. But long before she was an educator, she was also an activist in women's rights. She fought for um, equal pay in Italy before the turn of the 20th century for women. She also tried to start an organization called the White Cross, which would be to address the mental health and trauma needs of children and families and veterans during the wars that she experienced. So she had a deep commitment to peace and human dignity, and that shapes her educational philosophy. Um, she began her practice actually working in the psychiatric ward in with children, and first noticed that they were playing with crumbs on the floor because they lacked any kind of sensory stimulation. So um, she developed some purposeful activities for them to do, some sensory-based activities, and eventually those children passed public school exams. So then she became noticed that way. In 1907, she started her famous Casa dei Bambini, which was For the children that were causing trouble in the apartment complexes while their parents were at work. These were low-income people who had moved from the city to the city for jobs. And these were children that were not school age yet. So remember, these are children under 5 that were in the apartments by themselves. The landlords were worried about them causing damage, just kind of wreaking havoc on their own. So she moved her sensory environment, purposeful toys into this space, and within 6 months, she became world famous for that transformation. This is just a picture of another space you don't see often. I only recently learned about there was a big earthquake in Italy in 1908 in Messina, and there were 60 orphan children brought to a convent in Rome to be raised, and they were Montessori. This is a part of her white cross movement. Here is a picture of them sort of setting up their lunch, and they experienced Montessori education and influenced her work also, once again, connecting to that trauma-informed care before it was labeled that way. She trained teachers in that purposeful, practical life. And then finally, another sort of famous lunch picture. This is from Montessori's glass classroom, one of her 2 trips to the United States that she set up at the San Francisco World's Fair. People would come and watch the children work in the classroom. It was usually most popular at lunch as the children moved the chairs, tables together, served themselves. These were children that were just recruited from the community in San Francisco during that time. She was supported by Alexander Graham Bell, Helen Keller, Thomas Edison in her times in the United States. And then finally, of course, her life spanned World War I and World War II, Mussolini's takeover of Italy. And while she was invited to India to give a talk in the 30s and late 30s, early 40s by the Theosophical Society, she was actually detained there because she was a citizen of Italy, and England was then in control of India. So she was interned there as a foreign enemy. So in India, though, she developed her elementary curriculum and her work with toddlers. So this is a picture as she is later in life in India. Just for note, there are about 15,000 Montessori schools internationally. It's the considered the largest alternative education in the United States with about 3,000 Montessori schools. 500 or a little more than 500 of those are publicly funded programs. So consider this as we look at the planes of development is um, how do how does Montessori's life lead her to the perspective of um, helping humans develop a life of peace and purpose? And that for her became this planes of development. So Montessori observed that intellectual development occurs in 4 distinct phases that she referred to as planes or stages. She felt like the first, you'll see it in the picture of the planes, begins with the flame of life burning throughout the stages of child development. She felt through observation that children grow in 6-year increments or planes. From birth to 6 is the first plane. The second plane is 6 to 12. The third is 12 to 18, and then 18 to 24. Each plane has distinct characteristics, sensitivities, and psychological needs. Um, they're all, though, interconnected, and what is built in one plane develops and forms the foundation of the next plane. Montessori classrooms are designed to meet the needs of these children in particular planes, but also realize that there's some overlap between. So it's just like other developmental guidelines and theories, there's some um, range in that overlap. Multi-age classes in the Montessori space also is connected to the planes of development. So as we look through the first, I want you to think about the maybe a young person or infant toddler that you've worked with, and what qualities you notice in that first plane, what we consider a plane from 0 to 6. That's a big range of development, but Montessori puts them into one space. If you look on the screen, you'll see a shrink this a line, arrows going across the top, and then there's the flame, the beginning of life. And Montessori has the arrow going down to 3 and then back up to 6. That's the first plane of development. Montessori called that the absorbent mind, that these children don't just learn, but they absorb everything from their surroundings effortlessly. She divided this plane into two phases, 0 to 3, which was the unconscious absorbent mind. So children learn just everything from their senses. They take in everything that's around them. And then from 3 to 6, they start organizing all their sensory inputs. So they start learning the names of colors more. They start categorizing things. So they're organizing all their inputs from their senses. So the developmental focus at this age is, of course, movement, language, their independence, right? Their development of who they are as a person. They move away from that. You can see that in the infants, right? As they discover their hands are separate from those around them. And their psychological needs are to just construct themselves. They're interested in authentic participation in the community or in the family. So that's why at this age you'll see children very interested in helping out in the family, helping out mom or dad or their caregiver, wanting to wash dishes, wanting to help fold clothes, wanting to do whatever mom or dad or grandma or their caregiver is doing to support the household. So they want to set their table. They should be encouraged to make their own lunch, to be able to fill their own water bottles, put their shoes and socks on. In Montessori classrooms, they decide when they have snack on their own, individually, because they are in charge of whether they're hungry or not at that moment. It's a time of great physical and intellectual growth. They're searching for a sense of order and organization. This is the time in life where you see children organizing and sorting. They might be sorting their cars or their dinosaurs or organizing space. This is also seen in their need for routine. They need an organization in the structure to their day. They love to repeat things. So whether that's this reading the same book, to doing the same work. Montessori described a child who repeated one of the works in the classroom. She just observed them 28 times, and she even tried to distract the child, but they were so focused on this activity. They were discovering something through that repetition. Once again, they absorb everything. They're ego-centered. They are don't have the capacity yet to view from other perspectives. They also take their sensory impressions and that refinement. In the Montessori classroom, I have a set of colored tablets that are 7 of each shade of 9 colors. So there are 7 shades of yellow that the children can put in order from lightest to darkest or darkest to lightest. And when I show those, I know the yellow ones, my senses are not as fine-tuned as the child. So I have to take them to the window, to the natural light to see the difference between some of those shades of yellow. But for a young child, it's very obvious to them. This is a time for language development, movement, coordination. They're developing their concentration. They're also process oriented. So you've probably observed a child spending a lot of time coloring on a page. They might even choose just one color to color a page. And then I've seen the child get a pair of scissors out and just cut that piece of paper into as many pieces as they possibly, just cut, cut. And then they take that whole pile of things and throw it away. They're just interested in the process, not necessarily in the product. That's something that we adults bring to the table. And then they're very interested in small objects. That's another Montessori called these sensitive periods for small objects. And that is, if you've walked with a toddler, gone for a walk with them or a preschooler, they will notice every insect on the ground. If there's a little bead or a gem in the grass or in the sand, they will find it and they bring attention to that. So that is another part of Montessori's at this plane. Um, let's see. The guiding question at this age is what is that? That's what I like that this age their perspective is what is that? They want to know what it is, and that it motivates them. All right, so the second plane moves into elementary age. In a Montessori school, those kindergartners through 6 are in the classroom with the 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And then they move into the elementary classroom when they're 6. In my classroom, I see that in the spring, those kindergartners are ready to move on. They start changing. They're more social. They repeat less, things like that that we start seeing when we get to the second plane. As children build that independence and order in their early childhood classroom, now they're ready to explore that reasoning, imagination, and moral understanding in this second plane. So Montessori said in her book, Citizen of the World, we might say that younger children take things in sensorially. The child of 7 enters the abstract field. He wishes to know reasons. It's curious to notice that one of the things which preoccupy these children is what is ethical in life, what is good and what is bad. If you tell the little child that he is good or bad, he just accepts it. Whereas the 7-year-old wants to know why he is bad and what it is to be bad, etc. I think it's interesting because I always identify the 4-year-old seem in my experience, it starts to decide what's fair. And they often will sort of tattle on what they feel like is not a fair situation. And this move into the second plane is a more reasoning mind about what it means to um, have, I would say, good or bad choices, to make choices that are different. So the plane goes from 6 to 9 and 9 to 12. Once again, that's how Montessori classrooms are usually divided, is first, second, third grade, fourth, fifth, sixth grade. So the children at this age shift dramatically in that they don't accept the world as it is. They want to know why things work the way they do. This is not a time of great physical growth. It's a time of great mental and moral growth. They're starting to construct knowledge. They're moving into more abstract thoughts and ideas, so they're able to, along with imagination, developing, understand and empathize and see the world through the perspective of another child or a child in a story or person in the story. They no longer like to repeat things at all. Once they've done it, they feel like that's it. They can move on. Um, and they have a need to have an overview perspective before the details. So they need to see the whole before the parts. They're focused on friendship. So in the early childhood classroom, they were very interested in learning things. They were focused on themselves. So they do most of the things in that classroom by themselves. Whereas in the 6 to 12-year-old, they are more likely to learn by working with a peer. They are also goal oriented. So they're moving out of that process and they want to be they are goal oriented. And they are more able, while the young child is absorbs through their senses and takes in everything in their senses, the elementary child is able to filter things, to focus their senses. They crave really big ideas, how the universe works. They want to know stories of achievement. This is the time where they're interested in biographies and heroes of all different types. Montessori called this curriculum the cosmic education. It's the study of how everything connects. They're also interested in social justice and imagination. So while the first plane, actually, we could have talked a bit about Piaget, and this plane is more aligns a little bit with Vygotsky's social learning and collaboration. It's also the time that culturally you'll see in society we children are more likely to play team sports or to participate in scouts to build community and the understanding of like what fair play is. I remember when I was helping coach in an early childhood classroom as instructional coach, not the soccer coach. But the big conversation was always about what happened in the soccer game they organized at recess, who was being fair, who really scored the goal, who should be a coach next time, who wasn't, who wasn't honest, those kinds of things. So that's a big part of the development at this age. In a Montessori classroom, they also do a lot of research at this age on topics they're interested in, and they might participate in things that Montessori called going outs, which is a small group of children interested in a particular topic that might organize like a mini field trip to go gather information about a topic of specific interest to them. In Montessori's time, this was children, maybe going down to see the town doctor about some biology lesson. In the current times in the United States, this might be a virtual chat with someone, a call. It's a little more complicated to organize those sorts of things. And often the question of this age is that sharing of knowledge. It's that, did you know? Did you know this? They are so excited to share that big information that they have. Um, Next comes what Montessori called the second birth, um, adolescence from 12 to 18 years old. And this is the third plane. This is a time of turbulent yet creative development. Montessori said that these are social newborns. Montessori teachers sometimes call this a next toddlerhood, right? So the second toddlerhood, they're the adolescent is developing both physically and their identity, right? Their driving question is, who am I? If you've worked with adolescents, you know that they often will sort of change, they may change identity day to day as they begin to construct their adult personality. In Montessori classrooms or Montessori schools, this is also a time that it extends that purposeful work that they started when they were in early childhood. And Montessori really felt that this age needed to be active participants in the community. They needed to participate in working and connecting study with life. So they will run businesses. So economics was a part of it. In Montessori's time, she felt like they should work on the farm and participate and sell in that community. But Montessori schools, high schools now will some manage farms. They also will run small businesses, coffee shops. Some make Montessori materials using 3D printers. Some will run a cafe, or there's a school in Pennsylvania where they run a B&B. So it's not an abstract participation in the community. It's not in a develop a business plan for something. It's develop a business plan and put that plan into action. Montessori wrote that these children want to make direct contributions to society and have it recognized. It's something new. Adolescence is also a sensitive period for developing feelings of justice and personal dignity. These feelings are the most noble characteristics and ought to prepare the young adult to become a social being. They are interested in justice in the world, and it is a time where they are more interested in taking up a cause. So I think it's interesting as we see, especially an increase in activist youth movements around the world. And Montessori sort of felt that this was a part of it. The final plane Montessori identified and it recognized that now research shows that, the frontal lobe isn't finished developing till at least 26 and those pieces. And we can talk about it, or in another context, talk about adult development. But Montessori felt like this plane would carry independence forward into adulthood. And this is a time in the United States, of course, for high school graduation, perhaps college or trade school, professions, jobs. Um, it's the young adult integrates into the rest of society. Um, this is a time where there's an idealism, also a great time of uncertainty, and their central question is, how will I use my life? Montessori called this the cosmic task, which was aligning your values and your actions. Um, she didn't write as much, I will say, about the 18 to 24-year-old, of course. She wrote a little bit more about the third plane, the adolescent, the 12 to 18-year-old. She called that Erdkinder, the children of the earth. But most of her work was about that first plane and then somewhat of the second plane. All right, so this is what her planes of development looked like when she wrote about them. And it's also a rhythmic wave kind of thing. So the first plane, 0 to 6, and the third plane, 12 to 18, are times of rapid construction and transformation, both physically and mentally. Lots of development then. And then she felt like the 6 to 12-year-old and the 18 to 24-year-old periods are times for application of those skills learned in the previous plane and also consolidation of knowledge. Um, like like recognizing a rhythm helps educators respect when the child is at different plateaus and different needs. I think it's helpful to reflect on which plane of learners feel the most natural for you as a guide or for you to guide, the elementary, the early childhood, the adolescent, or the adult. Montessori also emphasized aside from the environment, the role of the adult. She felt like the adult guide, along with the environment, evolves as the children's age. So, in the first plane, Montessori teachers or guides act as a model and provide also safety in that protection. In the second plane, they guide and collaborate. The third plane, the adolescent, they mentor, and then in the fourth plane, they serve as a coach. Um, So as you think about this, this might be a time to think about where you see your role if you're an educator or a parent, a peer, work with youth or adults, where you see what you do more or less of as the people you work with are in different stages of development. Um, so Montessori wrote, I have found that during their development, children pass through certain phases, each of which has its own particular needs. The characteristics of each are so different that the passages from one phase to the other have been described by certain psychologists as rebirths. So Montessori planes align with other developmental frameworks, right? Piaget's cognitive stages. If you're interested, Piaget was actually on one of Montessori organizations in Europe for some time. Erickson's psychosocial stages, Vygotsky's social constructivism, also place-based learning in adolescence. And while she didn't go much into adult learning theory, Adrigoni and theories of adult education kind of align with some of her work, even if it's brief. What distinguishes Montessori is her integration of the intellectual and emotional and the spirit in like a truly in a holistic way. So I'm wondering if you want to note any other theories that you might see aligned with this or Montessori aligns with. Um, so understanding the planes reminds us that learning is not linear. Each stage prepares for the next, but we flow in a different process. She called the education for life was supporting the whole person. And so at this, I invite you to think back to a word you jotted down at the beginning when your thoughts on development and maybe how Montessori's idea of peace, education, or education for peace, and the development of this whole person might influence the way we look at our work with others. So, finally, just some resources. A lot of the quotes in the presentation were from Montessori's book, Citizen of the World. And also, if you're interested in more about Montessori's Plains Development or Montessori education, the American Montessori Society you can find at amshq.org. The Association Montessori International at montessori-ami.org. Both of those are kind of the largest Montessori groups in the country. And then you're welcome to email me at earlychildhood@amtep.org. And I want to thank you. I'm going to stop sharing and see if anyone has any questions.
Dr. Barton, um, what a great presentation on the planes of development. And I threw out a question to you in the chat, and that was expressing that in my Montessorian practice, I was most comfortable guiding children in the first plane of development. And I'm wondering which plane of development are you most comfortable and why?
I think I'm most comfortable in my framework is in the first plane, but I always try and stretch when I'm in the when I work with children in the second and third plane on that idea of purposeful work and independence. I have lots of ideas for pushing that preschooler or toddler to get themselves dressed or take care of their lunch or maybe, cut vegetables. But what that independence push, right, it looks like in elementary and adolescence is a little less clear for me, right? But yeah.
I'm right there with you.
Mhm.
Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. Um, we can give it a couple
Okay.
seconds to see if anyone else has any other questions for Dr. Barton. Okay, well, while we are considering some questions, I want to thank you, Dr. Barton, and to thank our audience for our participation in today's session, and want to encourage our audience to use the survey that's linked in the chat to nominate TLC presentations for conference awards and to share your feedback on this presentation that Dr. Barton made for us today. Thank you so much.
Mhm. Thank you.